I am Rebecca. I am 28 years old and work in the sales department of a system-related company. My company has a lot of business trips and I work overtime every day. The work itself is harsh, but what's worse is that most of the employees, including the president, have a sloppy attitude towards work. Especially, Mr. Morris, the manager who is my boss, was too bad. He would dump his work on his subordinates and not go to sales, and spend the whole day browsing the internet at his desk. In such an environment, I tried to achieve results with a serious attitude. However, for some reason, Mr. Morris didn't seem to like me. Finally, he caused a big incident that involved the company beyond my imagination. I hate to say it myself, but I was one of the few employees who worked hard since I joined the company. People who worked diligently quit one after another because they couldn't stand the terrible working conditions. As a result, the company's performance gradually declined. But the president didn't try to change the situation and didn't seem to have a sense of crisis. The word of job change was always on my mind, but I couldn't take the first step. I desperately worked on system development and ran around for sales every day because I joined the company with great expectations. And as I was working quietly by myself as usual, Mr. Morris called my name. Whenever Mr. Morris called me, nothing good ever happened. Because he was the most troublesome person in this department. He would steal the credit from his subordinates or blame them for his mistakes. It was a daily occurrence. I went to Mr. Morris's desk cautiously when he called my name. He told me to go on a business trip as his proxy from tomorrow. Apparently, he had received a request for system improvement from a client he was in charge of. But I had a lot of work to finish by the end of this week. I told him that, but he said it wouldn't be a problem if I finished all my work by today. There was a lot of work and I didn't know if I could finish it by today. When I hesitated, Mr. Morris told me not to disobey my boss's orders and used his position to pressure me. He also said that he had already contacted the other party and told them that I would be coming as his proxy. So I had no choice but to go on a business trip as Mr. Morris's proxy. I couldn't afford to inconvenience the other party, so I reluctantly agreed. Then he smiled triumphantly and told me to listen to him obediently from the beginning. That day, I worked until late at night and somehow finished my work and headed to the destination the next day. The person in charge of the client company was a very successful salesman who had a good reputation. As soon as I reviewed the system and made changes to make it easier to use, he was very satisfied and praised me for my excellent work.
I've asked your company to review the system before, but I've never seen anyone as talented as you, Rebecca!
He complimented me so much that I was happy. I was hardly ever appreciated for my work in the company, so I was so happy that I teared up. The client manager who saw me introduced me to someone. She was someone who might have a big impact on my future life. She told me to think about it and gave me her contact information. And 3 days later, when I returned from the business trip, exhausted and worn out, I saw a shocking sight. My desk was gone. I couldn't comprehend the situation and stood there dumbfounded. Mr. Morris came up to me with a smirk on his face. He told me not to come into the company as an outsider. I was too tired from the business trip and the daily overtime to think clearly. I asked Mr. Morris, who was still yelling at me to get out, what was going on. He said,
"You didn't come to the company for 3 days, but you came back now. How dare you suddenly slack off your work? Do you think you can get away with it? We don't need useless employees like you. You're done."
I didn't understand what he meant, and I asked him why I was slacking off when he asked me to go on a business trip. He said,
"The client you went to was originally my responsibility, you know? So the results of the work are obviously my credit." Ha ha! I told the upper management that I went on a business trip and did the work.
I couldn't believe his words. I panicked and said that it was impossible for him. He laughed maliciously at me.
Do you think that common sense works in this company? You were obedient at first, but you became rebellious lately. That's your fault. We don't need subordinates who don't listen to their boss.
I felt dizzy from his words. I worked hard every day, but this was too much. I started to tremble with anger at his outrageous behavior. He continued arrogantly.
By the way, I thought you quit because you didn't come to the company. You're useless anyway, so I processed your resignation letter.
It is impossible to submit a resignation letter without the person being present. When I asked what was going on, Mr. Morris said he had submitted a resignation letter on my behalf without my consent. And to my surprise, the president accepted it. At this point, I was so disgusted that I couldn't close my mouth. I don't care what happens to this company anymore. I swore in my heart that I would send this selfish and tyrannical Mr. Morris and the company to hell. You're ready for this, huh? I won't show any mercy. As I remained silent, Mr. Morris got carried away and continued.
I feel refreshed now that there's no one like you who can't be flexible. Of course, don't expect any severance pay, okay? There's no way someone like you who didn't do any decent work can get a proper severance pay.
I asked Mr. Morris, who was spouting unbelievable remarks, if he really wouldn't regret it.
Why would I regret anything? Just get out of here. You're useless now.
He laughed loudly. Is that so? Then I'll ruin this company. When I said that,
Huh?
he looked puzzled and couldn't understand.
Hey, did you go crazy after becoming unemployed all of a sudden? There's no way you have that kind of power.
He yelled at me. You'll regret it for sure, I said and left the company. And I headed to a major system company with my feet. It was a company run by a close friend of the manager I met at the business trip destination that Mr. Morris ordered me to go 3 days ago. I called the contact number I received from the manager. Then, a female president with a crisp voice answered me. When I explained the situation, she invited me to the company and talked to me in person. And I told her what happened at the company. She was very angry at the terrible response of the company. And she made me an offer and told me a surprising fact. A few months later, I woke up to the sound of my cell phone ringing many times in the morning. When I checked the call history, it was from my former workplace where I was fired. There were already more than 30 missed calls on my cell phone, and when the phone rang again, I reluctantly answered it. Then,
Hey, what the hell is going on?
I heard Mr. Morris's voice shouting at me. What is it? I think I have nothing to do with your company anymore? I answered with annoyance, and Mr. Morris seemed confused and started talking without any coherence.
This morning, the president suddenly said that this company was going to be acquired. And most of the employees might be fired. The president said it was because you were fired.
When I heard that, I laughed out loud as I expected. Mr. Morris got angry and asked me why I was laughing. Didn't you know anything about the situation of your company, Mr. Morris? I asked calmly, and he seemed puzzled by what I was talking about. Your company's management was declining year by year, you know? You had fewer and fewer clients than before. And that's why you couldn't maintain your business, right? He denied it and panicked, but I told him that this was an undeniable fact. Of course, the president must have known the situation, But he didn't seem to have any sense of crisis and was reluctant to reform the company and abandoned his responsibility.
But I've never heard that we were in such a critical situation before. And there were some companies that wanted to do business with us, right?
He was frantic and incredulous. Well, that's true. But wasn't that because the system I made was popular? The reason why the company could keep its business even though the president was like that was actually largely thanks to the system I made. By introducing the system, a lot of waste was reduced and the work was improved, and it was well received by many companies, and it contributed greatly to the company's sales.
But that doesn't mean we can be acquired all of a sudden. If we had kept selling the system as before.
He said that, but I asked him coldly. Let me ask you this. Is there anyone else who can manage the system besides me? He choked when he heard that. I was the only one who worked hard in my department, and of course I didn't hand over anything when I was fired. In such a situation, would there be any companies that would sign contracts with them as before? Even the stupid former manager could see the answer.
Then, why don't you come back?
He tried to patch things up as if he had an idea, but of course I refused firmly. That's not a joke. I will never go back. After all, it was Mr. Morris who suddenly fired me. And yet, he tells me to come back when he's in trouble. How selfish is that? No, thank you. Mr. Morris panicked at my words, but I didn't care. I coldly brushed him off, and he said,
Fine. I'll cancel the firing that I did with my authority. I think the president will hire you back right away if you do. And don't you want to get a job soon?
He tried to persuade me desperately, but I told him, I don't need that. I already have a new job. It's a major system company that plans to acquire your company. The former manager was stunned and called me a traitor. Actually, I was introduced to the president of the major system company at the business trip destination that Mr. Morris asked me to go to before. When I told her how I had been treated unfairly at the company, she was very angry and said she couldn't forgive it as a company in the same industry. She was also very interested in the system I made and its rights. The major system company welcomed me with a smile and asked me to join them as soon as possible when I told them how I was fired. In addition, the acquisition talk was already going on between the presidents. I told him that the result wouldn't change even if I went back. Then Mr. Morris started to flatter me.
Then, you can contact the female president, right? Then, can you please do something to get me hired too? They must want someone as talented as me, right? I don't want to be unemployed after I've been promoted so smoothly.
I laughed at Mr. Morris's words. Mr. Morris has talent? That's a joke, right? I've never heard of that. You spent the whole day without going to sales or developing systems, just browsing the internet. You have too high self-esteem, don't you? Mr. Morris was silent on the other end of the phone, maybe because my words were too harsh. Besides, the president is a very strict person, you know? She's a person who evaluates people by their abilities, and she doesn't seem to have any intention of hiring employees who don't have any past achievements. Mr. Morris was desperate and said,
No way!
And Mr. Morris is the one who framed me, right? Why do I have to help someone like that? I'm sorry, but I'm not that kind either. I said that firmly, and Mr. Morris changed his attitude.
I'm sorry. Isn't this enough? Please ask the president to hire me.
He begged me, but I didn't accept it at all. I don't need your apology now. And if you want to work for our company so badly, why don't you take the entrance exam? Well, I think people who have been slacking off will fail. It's time to pay the price for looking down on your work. Give up and accept it. Mr. Morris couldn't say anything at the end. I heard him sniffling on the other side of the phone, so he must be lamenting his miserable future. I was able to tell him everything I wanted to say, and I hung up the phone feeling refreshed. After that, my former workplace was acquired by a major system company as planned. Most of the employees who didn't do any work were fired. A handful of employees who worked hard and achieved results like me were rehired. Mr. Morris also tried to stick around, but of course he had no achievements or results and was fired as well. He lost his job suddenly and panicked to find a new one, but he lacked the experience and knowledge to get a job in the same system industry. He ended up having to live on day labor jobs. The former president also intended to escape alone after being acquired, but he couldn't repay his debts that had piled up from repeated business failures, and he was chased by debt collectors. On the other hand, I got along with my new workplace and was able to work in a much better environment than before. If Mr. Morris hadn't forced me to go on a business trip at that time, I wouldn't have met this wonderful connection, so I'm grateful to him for that. I want to keep working hard and contribute to the new company.
How did you like this story? Please also subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.
I haven't eaten for 3 days since Daddy died. Help me!
My daughter suddenly came to visit. She was emaciated, wearing tattered clothes. What on earth was going on? I couldn't make sense of it, but due to certain circumstances, I decided to ignore her. It's not my concern. But then my daughter's demeanor changed.
What? Are you still my mother? Are you going to abandon me?
Certainly, as a parent, one would try to help a distressed child, but I couldn't. Because. Can you all guess the reason? I'm Abby, 58 years old, working at a hospital as a medical secretary. I lived alone in an older home. However, it wasn't always that way. 18 years ago, I was married and lived with my family of 4. My husband, Cyrus, 3 years older than me, was a kind man. His stepdaughter, Ashley, had just turned 3. We met through mutual acquaintances, but Cyrus's wife had recently passed away, leaving young Ashley behind.
My mother helps with raising Ashley, but she's getting older, and I worry about her. Plus, it's heartbreaking for Ashley to grow up without a mother's love.
You're very kind. I was drawn to Cyrus's kindness and gentle nature when it came to Ashley and his mother. At the age of 40, I enjoyed living alone and thought I didn't need to remarry. However, I decided to marry Cyrus because I wanted to share my life with him. My live-in mother-in-law was 63 at the time. Although she seemed kind during our first meeting.
Nice to meet you. I'm Cyrus's mother.
I'm Abby. Pleased to meet you.
You're well-mannered. My son's ex-wife lacked education and was a terrible daughter-in-law. If someone like you becomes Cyrus's wife, I'll feel relieved.
While she might have been complimenting me, I felt uneasy about speaking ill of the deceased. At that moment, I didn't know much about Cyrus's ex-wife, and I thought perhaps she truly was that kind of person. Looking back, maybe I should have trusted my instincts and thought more carefully. If I had, I might not have experienced the hellish situation that followed. During that time, my parents had already passed away, and I had no close relatives. Cyrus had remarried without a formal wedding ceremony, Just a registration. After our marriage, Cyrus remained kind, but his work kept him busy with frequent business trips. He was rarely home, leaving only 3 of us, me, Ashley, and my mother-in-law. I had hoped to be a good mother to Ashley, but my mother-in-law insisted on raising Ashley herself. She kept Ashley close, leaving me with little opportunity to nurture her. My attempts to teach Ashley right from wrong were met with fierce resistance. Ashley, a spirited child, would jump from high places or throw away toys she didn't like. One day, I cautioned Ashley about her behavior. "Ashley, it's dangerous. And remember to take care of your toys," I said. Ashley responded dramatically.
"Grandma, Mom scolded me. Help."
Ashley, unaccustomed to reprimands, clung to my mother-in-law for support. In response, my mother-in-law glared at me with an intensity that left me speechless.
Raise her without scolding. Praise her instead.
My mother-in-law snapped.
After all, you're just a bloodless stranger.
I felt torn. I didn't want to burden Cyrus, who was already busy with work, but I worried about Ashley's well-being. When I gently discussed it with Cyrus, his expression changed. His eyes widened, and his lips trembled as if he feared something.
Sorry. My mother gets emotional about Ashley.
Cyrus confessed.
I'll try to talk to her. Please don't worry too much, Abby.
But it's not about me. It's Ashley I'm concerned about, I replied. Cyrus didn't say more, but it seemed he had spoken to his mother. Despite her softened tone toward me, my mother-in-law remained adamant about not allowing me to interfere in Ashley's upbringing. As I feared, Ashley's stubbornness grew worse. She'd point at TV commercials, demanding we buy whatever she desired.
"Look. I want this. You have to buy it."
Ashley would insist, throwing tantrums. My mother-in-law would relent, saying,
All right, Ashley. I will buy it. Don't be upset.
Ashley throws tantrums until she gets what she wants. When she was younger, it was mostly toys and inexpensive treats, but as she entered middle school, she started craving expensive items. She shamelessly begged for brand-name clothes and bags that her wealthy friends owned. My mother-in-law tried to buy these things for her, but eventually, money became tight, and she turned to me.
As a mother, it's only natural to buy what she wants.
See? Stepmother is heartless.
Ashley also berated me. I consulted Cyrus.
What? Ashley is that demanding?
Cyrus seemed surprised, and no wonder. Ashley only played the obedient, cute child in front of her father. Cyrus lovingly advised Ashley.
Ashley, we're things within your means. Not everything you desire is attainable. Learning to be patient is important. Don't trouble Grandma or Mom.
Sorry for worrying you, Dad. All my friends have these things, so I wanted them too. I'll try to be patient from now on.
I'm glad you understand.
My mother-in-law nodded too, and I thought things would settle down. But I was wrong. The next day, when Cyrus left for work, Ashley's attitude was changed. She kicked me hard from behind while I was hanging laundry in the yard. I fell, hurting my back.
Ouch! What are you doing?
You dared to tattle to Dad about me. Meddling in things that don't concern you. I won't forgive you.
But I was thinking of your well-being.
Shut up.
Ashley's behavior worsened over time. Despite discussing it with Cyrus, she'd pretend remorse in front of him but retaliate against me in secret. Soon, rumors spread among neighbors and school teachers that the stepmother mistreated her. She even posted negative comments about me on social media. I became an outcast, enduring insults day and night. Afraid of Ashley's retaliation, I stopped confiding in Cyrus. By the time Ashley graduated middle school, even my mother-in-law couldn't handle her anymore. Amidst all this, my mother-in-law suddenly collapsed and passed away.
Tut. The old hag probably didn't save enough allowance.
Despite the fact that my mother-in-law, who had cared for Ashley so dearly, had just passed away, Ashley didn't shed a single tear. Instead, she clicked her tongue and selfishly thought only of herself. I was overwhelmed by disbelief. As I busied myself with my mother-in-law's funeral arrangements and attending to mourners, someone gently approached me. It was Maria, a relative who had always been kind to me.
I'm sorry. There's something I've kept from you.
She proceeded to reveal the shocking truth that my husband's ex-wife, Ashley's biological mother, had been a remarkably kind person. However, she suffered severe mistreatment from my mother-in-law, was separated from Ashley, and ultimately succumbed to despair, taking her own life. I was in shock. I realized that I, too, had been on the brink of mental anguish, just like Ashley's biological mother. When I asked Cyrus about it, he apologized sincerely.
I had strongly advised my mother not to burden you with such feelings.
I couldn't blame Cyrus, who had always been kind to me. At that moment, Ashley's harassment weighed more heavily on me than my mother-in-law's passing, but I couldn't bring myself to confide in anyone. Ashley was that terrifying. I considered facing Ashley once more, but by then, it was too late. Her behavior had deteriorated further. As middle school graduation approached, she skipped classes, roamed around with heavy makeup, and pilfered money from my wallet. When Cyrus was present, she behaved innocently, but in his absence, she intensified her cruel harassment. She spat at me and even threw objects at me unexpectedly.
Why do you behave so horribly? You act sweet in front of your father.
Humph. Dad's wealthy, you know. All the assets will be mine. You're in the way. Get out of this house.
I don't need money. I just wanted to be your mother.
Shut up.
Ashley seemed impervious to my words. She grabbed my hair, dragged me, and kicked me from behind. My body was covered in bruises. Her harassment escalated, and during Cyrus's extended business trip, I was finally forced out of the house by Ashley, who left me with nothing but the clothes on my back. It was a bitterly cold day, snowflakes drifting down. The neighbors viewed me as a wicked stepmother, and I couldn't seek help. Standing numbly outside the locked front door, shivering in thin clothing, I was startled when Cyrus returned from his trip earlier than expected.
Abby? What are you doing out here?
Taken aback by my appearance, Cyrus removed his coat and draped it over me. Tearfully, I explained everything. Though he listened sternly, his response surprised me.
Leave. Get out of this house right now.
Disappointed, I left Cyrus and the house behind. Fast forward 5 years. Although I had severed ties with Cyrus's relatives, I continued to maintain contact with Maria. She called me to apologize. Apparently, Ashley had threatened her, insisting that if she didn't reveal my address, there would be consequences. Why would Ashley suddenly need anything from me now? Soon after, the intercom buzzed, and the camera revealed a haggard-looking Ashley. Reluctantly, I opened the door. There stood Ashley, emaciated and wearing tattered clothes.
I haven't eaten for 3 days since Daddy died. Help me!
What on earth is going on? I was baffled, but stood my ground. I have no obligation to you. Ashley's demeanor shifted dramatically.
What? Are you still my mother? Will you abandon your daughter?
While it's natural for a parent to want to help a troubled child, I had no such obligation. After all, I had suffered immensely at Ashley's hands.
You're a stranger. If you persist, I'll involve the police.
I shut the door and locked it.
Remember this. I'll make you regret it.
From beyond the door, Ashley's angry shouts echoed. Soon after, the harassment began, graffiti on the walls, garbage in the mailbox, all orchestrated by Ashley. I had evidence, and I wouldn't tolerate it any longer. I had prepared for Ashley's visit. I called her. Hey, it's me. Can you come over? I need to discuss something.
Finally willing to help, Mom. I'll be right there. Make sure you have a substantial amount of money ready. Otherwise, things won't end well.
Ashley arrived, jubilant.
Hand over the money quickly. And don't try to deceive me with pocket change.
I won't give you any money.
What? You?
As Ashley raised her fist in anger, a booming male voice came from the back room.
I'm dead? News to me.
Ashley stepped back, eyes wide, shocked to see Cyrus. In reality, when I left the house, Cyrus had warned me.
Abby's safety is at risk. Living with Ashley is impossible. Let's pretend we're divorced, and you should leave for now.
Subsequently, Cyrus bought another home for me. His frequent business trips allowed him to shuttle between Ashley and me. So when Ashley claimed Cyrus was dead, I immediately saw through her lie.
How dare you deceive me?
I believe it was you who told the lie. I know everything. In fact, I had heard about Ashley's situation from Cyrus. 6 months ago, Ashley had married someone she met on a dating app. However, her reckless spending and mounting debts led to a divorce, and she was kicked out. Cyrus had stepped in to cover her debts.
You're an adult. You need to stand on your own from now on.
But Ashley's lifestyle remained unchanged. She accumulated more debt, and desperate for money, she ended up at my doorstep.
If you're not divorced, then you're still my mother. Give me money for your daughter.
I was exasperated by Ashley's audacity.
You and I never had an adoption arrangement. We're not parent and child. I'll report your harassment.
What? I haven't done anything like that. You intend to accuse me without evidence?
I showed her the surveillance camera footage. As soon as Ashley left after hurling insults, I suspected she might try something, so I installed cameras. The footage clearly captured Ashley harassing in front of my house.
Ashley! What are you doing?
Humph. I don't want to hear it from a man who abandons his daughter.
Ashley finally revealed her true self even in front of Cyrus.
This conversation is also recorded, serving as evidence.
Cornered, Ashley turned pale. She desperately apologized and begged for forgiveness.
Please don't involve the police. Let it go. I just wanted some pocket money.
I sternly replied.
I won't forgive you. I'll never forget the harm you've caused me. Besides, forgiving you here won't benefit you. Pay for your sins.
No.
Cyrus and I stared coldly at the crumbling Ashley. Subsequently, Ashley was arrested and found guilty. Even after her release from prison, her actions remained infamous, and no one was willing to help her. With debts looming, she faced a miserable life. We sold my mother-in-law's house, and Cyrus and I moved to a rural home where Ashley wouldn't find us. Her phone number was blocked, ensuring we'd never meet again. I now enjoy peaceful days with kind-hearted Cyrus.
How was this story? Please subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.